So I reached out to a few friends and put together a team for the challenge, which was about coming up with ideas on how we can do democracy better, given the technology that we have, and specifically large language models. And not to say that tech is a solution to every problem, but tech does present opportunities, and I don't think we are as humanity all that great at seizing them. It takes us some time to figure out what to do with the fire now.
You are listening to the Humanity in the Loop podcast.
Welcome to the Humanity in the Loop podcast. I'm your host, Tim Hampton. My guest today is Elena Yunusov. Elena is a deep tech marketing and strategy leader with a focus on artificial intelligence. Elena has been in AI before ChatGPT, leading marketing at Borealis AI, an AI research institute founded by RBC. Elena was nominated for the RBC Canadian Women Entrepreneurial Awards for her work with her agency Communicable Inc, which was named among top women in Canadian tech by BetaKit. Today we are going to discuss AI, why it is both exciting and a little scary, and what we can do to improve AI alignment and safety. Elena, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim.
So we were talking a little bit about, before we started recording, and about your LinkedIn profile, and it really tells a story. There's 18 experiences listed, many of them running simultaneously. You're a community builder, a creator, an organizer, basically never a dull moment. Have you always had an entrepreneurial streak, or is that something you've cultivated?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's something I grew up with. I grew up doing a million things all at once. I went to school. I had a music school on the side. I had aerobics classes, books to read, usually 5 or 7 at a time, because one is not enough. And it seems to be just what makes me stable in life. I think of myself and my career as a kind of a chair where I just can't be stable with just one leg or two. And they all build on each other. To me, they're connected. Because that is a question that I've been asked before, and why do this for yourself, and why not just do one thing? It's also a matter of the career that I've chosen. As a marketer, I really don't believe in that. I think as a professional, you owe it to the field to be a very strong generalist before you acquire any kind of depth. And not to say that depth is bad, depth is terrific. It's great, but without seeing the connections, I just don't know how you can do this job and be good at it for any sustainable length of time.
So let's pick up on the breadth and the depth. A lot of your attention has been devoted to deep tech marketing. So first of all, what is deep tech? And secondly, what are some of the challenges of marketing it?
Sure. So deep tech, to me, those are technologies like AI, like blockchain, things that are coming at people that are confusing and aren't easily understood. I do like to be in the technical weeds. I am someone who loves talking to engineers and researchers and reading scientific papers, blogs all day long. It's the best thing for me, and really trying to understand these things from a normal person standpoint and bridging it out to the rest of humanity who just don't have the time to be like, oh, what's the best paper award at Murex? And what are the main trends in computer vision? And to be honest, part of it is from being a journalist. I have a hungry, curious brain that just needs to be fed information, and I tend to then process it and do an output that is fairly accessible. And I do love doing that for people, and that to me is really the biggest challenge as well in tech. There's just not enough of that connecting back into the normal, regular world. there hasn't been a need really in the field to just develop those skills yet. It might happen with AI especially, but not it until now. You could be coding from the basement and changing the world.
And so, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that the technologies that have been produced, or many of the technologies that have been produced to date, have had an obvious need, but then some of these new technologies, you're almost encouraging people to adopt the technology and what they do instead?
Connect the dots for them a little better. Help them understand how it might impact their work. If they want to adopt it, great. If not, I'm curious to hear why and what the challenges are. I won't be pushing technology on anybody. I've never have, but I do think exposing people to new things is fun. And so I've done that with events like Maker Festival that I've organized with a terrific group of people, where it was all about that and bringing kids into that and making things and exposing them, not in a sense of one too many and here's how X will change your life and your world and talking down. It was, let's play with it, let's make something. And you will learn and understand things and have a very different perspective when it is informed by doing and tinkering, which I really do believe in.
So my son and I are beneficiaries of your efforts. We attended Maker Festival twice. At one of them, my son made a small Christmas tree ornament, which was a printed circuit board that he soldered LED lights on. So, that's a cherished memory. That was an incredible event. What was the genesis of that? How did you get involved in that? How did you bring it into being?
Sure. So a small group of us, we've organized events before. We came together to organize HoHoTO, which was a tech fundraiser years back. And it came together fairly organically on Twitter. We've organized it with using Twitter and email. I remember, 1,000 emails in something like 30 days. And organized completely online. So I haven't met some of the people I did that with until the actual night of HoHoTO. We did that festival for a bunch of years and then thought what else we could do that would be fun. And then there was a Maker Festival here that was fairly small. And the group that was organizing it just for various reasons didn't see it continue. And so some of us decided to take it over, and I was brought in to that adventure, given that I knew the people. I said yes before I knew what it was. And then I traveled to Detroit Maker Fair, which is one of the biggest in the US, which was interesting because in Detroit, it was remarkably not diverse at all. There was remarkably few kids there, but the kids that were there had just a blast. They were just out of their minds. And so I came back with a fairly clear vision that whatever we do, it's got to be a family thing. And thankfully, we were all on the same page on the organizing committee. And so it grew that way. It grew not from here's another nerdy thing. It grew from it being, it's a family thing. It's a thing. It's an event for students, for kids, for grandparents, for people walking on the street and having a library support us at Toronto Reference Library on Yonge and Bloor, which is their biggest, gorgeous venue, and give us all that space. And let us close the streets around it when it grew so big that it was bursting out of the library at that point. It was just an amazing ride, and I love that we did that.
Yeah. Congratulations. And again, thank you very much. That is a cherished memory for me and my son. When did your interest in artificial intelligence start?
I would probably say I've always been interested in AI, given the sci-fi books that I've read. You just couldn't escape it. And it just wasn't a field that someone like me was really needed for quite some time. And it slowly started getting there. I remember attending AI and design meetups organized by my friends at Normative, which was fantastic. So did that. Read some more. It stayed on the periphery for quite some time, and then when the opportunity came up to lead the marketing function at Borealis AI, I jumped on it and I just dove right in. I couldn't read enough. I still can't stop. Like there's just so much, and things change very quickly too.
Mhm.
And I like understanding why, and I like having a thesis on where things are going. It's not enough for me to read news articles and worry about existential risk at night. I just don't operate that way. I'm like, okay, what do you mean by X, Y, Z? And can we dig into it and do some kind of inquiry into it best I can, and then report back.
Science fiction is a remarkable thing because it's both a prediction and also a roadmap, and sometimes it's just completely wrong, and sometimes it's more right than I thought. Like, for example, C3PO. Yeah, as a kid, I looked at that and I said, that's ridiculous. First of all, you would never have individual instances of AI. You'd have it on the cloud. Like, even as a kid, I was thinking that way. And why would you have a robot sitting in a seat controlling a car, for example? Why wouldn't and here we are today, and my mind is just switching back. Like one can have AI running on a Raspberry Pi if you try hard enough.
Yeah.
And the idea of having something like C3PO, a humanoid robot, we don't have to redesign the world for the robots. It's designed for us, and the robots have to conform to us. Like it's amazing how sometimes technology catches up to science fiction.
Yeah. And speaking of my career, I've been asked what it is that I am. And I do describe myself as a human cyborg relations specialist.
Excellent. Are you familiar with the binary language of moisture evaporators?
Yeah, so I do relate.
So you wrote on LinkedIn, and I'm quoting here, businesses will need more heart and more imagination to move to the next level of abstraction offered by AI, even further away from hardware and ones and zeros. Machines are moving closer to humans finally. That is the future I'd like to live in, end quote. So tell me more about this future you see and the role that AI will play.
One of the reasons I'm excited about AI is exactly because it is the next level of abstraction that we're looking at here. If you think about the history of computing in the way things have started, things have been very close to hardware. People assembled their own computers. You couldn't write a program if you didn't know hardware and how things worked. You had to debug it and fix it. And there is a fantastic show called Halt and Catch Fire that describes that time really well and captures the energy there. And so it was something that kept changing and adapting. And in that show, they do go through that with Apple and how Apple has been introduced, and even the attitudes around computer language and programming and design, how things evolve into it being something that is farther away from the nuts and bolts and closer to how people would communicate. People started coding because they felt it's a way to talk to the machines. And the machines compiling and saying hello world really felt groundbreaking. It felt like meeting a friend who would talk back, understand what she's saying. It's just you had to be a programmer to have that conversation. And even then, even that early, Apple had a machine that would literally say something to you, which just blew people's minds. Apple, of all companies, has been pushing for it since day one. They have been moving farther and farther away from the nuts and bolts, from the algorithms. It's there has been an article that I read about how AI is the blurry picture of the web. The article itself aside, I do like the metaphor because we have been looking at, 11001, something more like the QR code that's behind us.
Yeah, yeah.
And then slowly, the image is being made sharper. And okay, I can see the trees now. Okay, I can see the sun now. And I no longer see the zeros and ones that image is made out of. And I don't need to fill the gaps so much because, the fuzzy image of an apple was quite acceptable early on. You would cut computers some slack and you would understand that this is an apple, even though it was pixelated to the nth degree. We just don't accept that now. So things have been getting sharper and more real life and farther away from the ones and zeros. And with phones, with now Vision Pro that Apple has introduced, with the watch, what is computer anymore? And are we finally in the matrix? I don't have an answer. But I do know that we want machines to be more like us. It just tends to seem to be how we want the world to run. And we don't really want to code, really. I mean, some of us do, some of us always will, but we just want Earl Grey tea hot.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I mean, it sort of reminds me, some people, you're right, do want to get under the hood. You think when you press the gas, you're just telling the engine to go to produce more power. Then you see the mechanic under the hood actually manipulating the throttle, and you realize, oh, there's something to it, but it's abstracted. I just do it from inside the car. It does my bidding based on what I do with my foot. And this reminds me of something you said, and I think we're kind of on the same wavelength about this, that you hate Photoshop and you hope it dies. I'm with you because the interface is just so hard. And here we are in an age where I can say to, and I won't say it out loud, Miss A, my Amazon assistant, could you please set an alarm for 1 hour from now? I don't have to dig in through menus or read a manual. I can just shout at it. And I wonder if you see a future where these interfaces eventually get replaced by something that's more abstract, or removes the abstraction, I should say. Or is that correct? I guess no, it abstracts the complication and makes it more accessible.
Yeah, we want to abstract complexity away. We don't really, most of us, like you said, some people will always be fascinated by what's under the hood. That's where they live and they love that. Most of us just don't have the time to be like, why is my clock showing 10? Let me open it up and
oh, it's daylight savings again. Yeah.
And so, yes, most of us want complexity to be abstracted away. And we want it in our technology, we want it in our businesses, and we've been good at it as humanity. We've abstracted ourselves away from a lot of complexity over the years, and technology is no different, really. So we will see hopefully more human first interfaces for a lot of things. I think we will see tech first and bot first interfaces as well, because we're just doing different jobs now. And so we're looking at interesting future, really. Will machines tell us what to do? Some of us will do what machines tell us to do. And should we rearrange our supermarkets now for shoppers who shop on my behalf because I told my program that I want grapes? Should stores rearrange how they put their produce out based on who actually shops and how fast they need to do it? There's so many interesting second, third order consequences to how things change because of what's possible technologically. Some of it is good, some of it not so great.
Yeah, well, COVID opened my eyes to the possibility of having groceries put in my trunk based on what I asked for on an app, and I just love it. I'm surprised when I go to do that. I'm often like one of 3 cars waiting for that, and everybody else is going inside. They have to find a quarter for the cart. They have to have their own bags. Like I just put, it's so convenient. I love it.
That that though is something of a cultural thing, maybe, because I had a chat with friends yesterday about European food markets. If you've ever been to Barcelona, those are gorgeous. Halls to food and pleasure, and restaurants are inside, and your kids are playing, and you go and pick your groceries, but you also get together with people. Very life, and I wonder why we just don't have to. We have nothing like it here.
No.
Not
Well, you are right that it definitely loses the social interaction, although often the person putting the groceries in the trunk is quite friendly. But, if you're elderly, for example, shopping might be one of your rare contacts with people,
yeah,
You're right. It is.
it's always always been interesting to me how maybe we just don't want that much social interaction here in this society for whatever reason. Maybe we just want an app, and then the coffee appears.
Yes, that would be great.
Yeah.
Cheers. So tell me about your role in OpenAI's project called Democratic Inputs to AI. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, that came out in June, just as I had some time on my hands and thought, what could I be doing that's meaningful? It's right up there. It's about things I care about. AI will have an impact on democracy. It will have an impact on how people relate to each other, how we learn about what political issues we should be even looking at, and how we get engaged and discuss and get to some kind of common ground, which if you've been online for the past few years.
What common ground?
Exactly. So it's been not the best of times for democracy and civilized discourse, which goes against pretty much every business model. It seems. And so when I saw that challenge, I thought, well, why not me? Why not do it? Even if we don't get the grant, we will at least contribute to the stack of thoughts and ideas a company like OpenAI will do something with, because they are smart. They're doing it to crowdsource ideas, is my perspective on it, to then take it back and maybe build something and launch something, or perhaps they'll take it to governments as part of their deck. Who knows where those ideas will end up? I do think that's not a company where ideas go to waste, though. And so it's been exciting as an opportunity to have a say at the ground level of AI governance. Like I said, if we win the grant, fantastic. Then we can build the prototype and test it and evaluate it. But even being in the pile of ideas, it felt like a worthwhile endeavor to me. And so I reached out to a few friends and put together a team for the challenge, which was about coming up with ideas on how we can do democracy better, given the technology that we have, and specifically large language models. And not to say that tech is a solution to every problem, but tech does present opportunities, and I don't think we are, as humanity, all that great at seizing them. It takes us some time to figure out what to do with the fire now. Mm-hmm. Hey, we've got the wheel. Yay, now what to do with that? Or electricity. It always takes us quite a while. And so democracy, given how important that is, can we maybe accelerate some of that software eating the world situation to scale it better? So we had a professor of AI and ethics and technology on the team. We had a designer, we had an engineer, amazing people, and we've had a couple of conversations, and I've produced a draft and captured people's thoughts, and then after a few revisions, sent it to a larger peer review group that we put together, made up of smart people who poked holes at our paper, our thesis, which again, we were really grateful for. And then, we put together a submission and hit send.
That's
to
amazing. When will you hear?
today actually by end of
Oh,
day. Yeah. Uh,
well, thank you so much for making time for this conversation. If I was you, I'd be like in a corner going, please, please, please. So
yeah, part of me
very
is
exciting.
part of me is in the corner going, please, please. But again, like I said, I'm fine with either outcome. It's been a fun project.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well done. Um, so let's talk a little bit more broadly about the risks that AI pose to humanity. Do you have any particular concerns, or do you think that people are being overblown about it?
Well, what we're seeing is people's reaction to rapid change. We don't really like change, not really. For good reasons, because change is scary. It may not be necessary. We better understand what it is, a stick or an animal trying to eat us, even historically. Takes us time, and we err on the side of caution for survival. And so we're seeing that conversation around AI. On one side, the sky is falling. We've lost control of the robots. They're out to get us. This has been a sci-fi story for a very long time. And so that seems to be some kind of primal fear of, oh, they will be stronger, more capable than us, and they will take over. And we're just the blip in the evolution
Right.
on Earth. And on the other side, you have people who are saying, no, that's just a new set of technologies like the wheel, like electricity, and databases are not out to get us. They're not evil. Will not die by Excel. And they're not conscious. They do not really think. They're very good pattern recognition prediction machines.
Right.
Pattern recognition intelligence. Is that all it is? Our intelligence is just good pattern recognition? Question mark.
Yeah.
And so I do understand both sides of this. On both sides of this argument, there is incredibly accomplished, credible people. And I would love for more conversation between these two that isn't shouting at each other, and more respect for these perspectives, and more exchange of the ideas, because I just don't think either side has it 100% right at this point.
Yeah. I actually feel like the discussions about the risk of AI haven't become shouty yet. And I think it's because you can't yet map a viewpoint to Republican or Democrat. Like,
Okay.
there are people on both sides of the aisle who think it's good, both sides of the aisle who think it's bad, and so it hasn't got shouty yet. But when they finally find a way to shove it from one side or the other, that's when you're going to start seeing it become like that, very polarized.
Really hope that whole thing won't get politicized. I really do. It's shouty in my little corner. It certainly feels more shouty than I've ever seen.
Really? Shouty how? Like just saying, you idiot, it's going to kill us all. Stop doing it.
Yeah, pretty much, but more politely.
Okay.
As there's most people with PhDs,
Yes.
it's that, but
I
expressed.
question your conclusions, sir.
Yeah.
How much faith do you have in the idea of explainable AI, that we can always sort of audit what AI does?
Good question. I think we want to understand. I don't think we will always get it. And I don't think it really matters in completely every context under the sun. If I could explain everything that I use, we talked about the under the trunk and the under the hood metaphor and complexity being abstracted away. We say we want it, but do we really? That's my question. As long as we get the utility from it, as long as we get what we want, do I really need to know how the planes are up in the air? It might make me nervous, actually. If I start crawling there and finding like the little wires that maybe don't connect. So I think in some applications of critical importance, we would need explainability. In many other cases, we would need a balance of, we would need solidly built technology. We would need it to be robust, so not fail on us. We want some confidence that if I'm driving through the bridge won't collapse underneath me. Software, and so software overall will need to be more standardized maybe for safety, because it is just adopted at levels that are critically important infrastructure now. And so in those cases, I understand, or where there's human impact, where it's anything to do with policing or government or finance, health. Those are fundamentally human systems with large consequences should things go wrong. And so those make people nervous. And just as you would ask a doctor to explain to you why they think this is your diagnosis, we should be getting similar explanations from machines. I think we stand a better chance, to be honest, because with people, we know people are people. And so we are more biased than we think. It's been fascinating to see with large language models, two things have emerged. Seems that they have a better bedside manner, so to speak. So the answers show more empathy. They are also, which is slightly dangerous, dangerous and interesting at the same time. They're more trustworthy. And so I'm more convinced, apparently, as a human by what AI has to say. So I tend to trust it more and question it less. And I'm also not annoyed by it as much. So there is some kind of empathy gap that AIs are closing better than humans typically do. On bias, we know it's more or less a solved problem on a technical level.
Right.
So implementing it into systems and agreeing on guidelines and business directives around things like bias is a challenge. But I'd love AI to be in charge of decisions where bias is a problem. If you build it right, it will be better than human decision making in many, many, many cases like this.
So a couple of threads to pull on there. One is I think one of the reasons I find talking to a machine easier than talking to people is because they're endlessly patient, right? You can ask follow up after follow up after follow up after follow up, and it doesn't care. It's happy. You can refine, like if you're talking to ChatGPT and you're like, give me a summary of the Civil War, and you're like, I don't get that part. What can you expand on that? Can you shrink that? Can you skip that? So it's endlessly patient. You described the bias problem as being technically solved, and I think I agree with the idea that there has to be a technical solution, because the real source of bias is the data, right? So if you recognize that you're working with biased data, then theoretically you can lean on the scales a little bit, or tell it to lean on the scales and correct for that bias. But it doesn't seem to be what people are experiencing with, like if I ask Stable Diffusion to draw me a picture of a family, not everybody's delighted with the sometimes stereotyped results, right? Where do you see... Do you see any problems like with bias now that you see are on their way of being worked out?
I sure hope that they are. This is where companies should take responsibility. Let's not blame the technology. The technology is very good if you tell it to be unbiased. Put the right weights in the right places. It will be amazing. If you don't pay attention to that aspect of how your algorithms are working, then you will get less than a result that is biased, and because of the data that it's been trained on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, stable diffusion is maybe just that's very new still. I hope they will fix it. I've been impressed by OpenAI, to be honest, with how different that launch was compared to chatbots that we've seen that would be pulled days later because they start cursing, offending people's feelings.
or deciding to wipe out humanity. Yeah, that was an
Exactly.
interesting result.
Yeah, so there's been some interesting, side personalities that have been discovered within ChatGPT, but overall, the opposite has happened. I think we see things that we didn't expect, and it's not as offensive as we would have thought it would be because they thought about it and they put quite a few things in place and continue working on that and taking that quite seriously. Not to say that they fix the universe, but I could see that they're trying, and they're trying to do it in a startup way, which is iteration.
Mm-hmm.
So things that have been wrong with the algorithm early on that people have pointed, they have addressed. There's a long, long list that isn't addressed yet that I know scientists are gathering, and it's not exactly an open AI situation, even though the company is called OpenAI.
Right.
It's not an algorithm that you can easily look at and assess, but it did catalyze renewed interest in alignment and safety and ethics, and that is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I don't feel like the attention is overblown. I think it's warranted and makes a happy outcome more likely. So I'm all for it. One of the areas where AI runs the risk, or we run the risk of AI producing bad outcomes, is on social media. There's plenty of motivated reasoning on social media as it is, and a lot of effort to convince people to sway one way or the other. And you can do that with bots. You can do that with misinformation. And it's easier to create that kind of thing at scale with with AI tools. There's also censorship at scale using AI. Like I think it's inevitable that platforms, I mean, Twitter, they've almost thrown their hands up and say they can't do anything. But other platforms, including AI, are probably OpenAI, are probably using AI to police what is produced. That's, is this necessary? Is it dangerous? The problem is it gets to the point where AI, on the one hand, we're seeking AI alignment, which is you do what we want, but then in turn, that tool is affecting what we do and aligning us. How do you see that emerging?
We live in interesting times. Misinformation is definitely a problem. So is censorship. Just generally, scale is a problem. We just, as humans, don't have access to that kind of scale. When somebody makes a bad decision and denies me a loan, that's one person. When it's algorithm doing that at scale, that's quite problematic. And so, say with misinformation, you convincing me of something, fine, but if it's you times million and it's completely automated and convincing how many people at scale of something, that's a whole different situation. And that is dangerous, and I do not have an answer because business models that we see aren't necessarily and have not been regulated or really looked at seriously for the harm that they have done to, like we said, the social and political discourse.
Well, that brings me to another point you've made online, speaking of regulation and what government can do. Somewhat, not necessarily related to AI, but definitely related to regulation and sometimes the unintended consequences. You commented on Canada's Bill C-18. And so on just a couple of weeks ago, Google announced that they would because of Bill C-18, they found it unworkable and that they will remove links to Canadian news from their search, news, and discover products in Canada. You described this as botched policy. What is the government's goal and what went wrong?
I wish I knew what the government's goal was. It sounds like they're trying to protect the media. At least maybe that's the intent. I wish they thought more deeply about the interest of Canadians. I really want to read Canadian news. I use Google every day and I use Facebook too. And so for people to be prevented from reading their own news seems like not the right approach, maybe. And just I don't know. I wish somebody there would take seriously the criticisms that were very public around that bill, coming from very smart people, about how internet works and how media models work and what do we have here in Canada and how can we support the media that we do have without negatively impacting Canadians' access to news, which to me is quite important.
So the ostensible goal, I thought, was to basically make it so that funds flowed to news outlets, right? That was the goal. The mechanism was they were trying to get Google to pay for what they display. Which brings me to the larger question, which is, as there's more layers, I mean, in a way, you could look at it as a layer of abstraction, that we're abstracting away from what the news outlet produces. And you've been a journalist. So let's say you write an article for the local paper, and then that content winds up displayed somehow through Google, or in the future through ChatGPT. We wind up in a world where the ownership of intellectual property almost gets lost, abstracted away. And that's threatening to people who produce intellectual property. What do you see as a mechanism in the future to see to it that people do get rewarded for what they produce?
I wish I had an answer. I really do. It's definitely something more companies should look into because it's part of the business model, really, even. And who do we trust? And of all companies, TikTok has been really quite good at encouraging creators, giving them tools, making it easier for people to create.
Right.
When that ends up on my feed, I know the source of that and can track it to the source quite easily. So that's been a pretty good example, I'd say, of a company that is interested in content producers more than users clicking on ads. And so optimized for that, I think, because I'm not obviously working there, but it's sure given people a voice and a way to express themselves and talk about issues that other channels just weren't giving. And so we will see the cheese moving, really. I don't think any one company has an answer. Things being abstracted away, that has been the case with knowledge since who knows when. And when I want to know what happened, I just want to know what happened. I don't always care if it's CBC or New York Times or where the source of that information. And so on a consumer level, even, at the end of the day, we will tend to serve people better. Whatever business model does that job better is what ultimately wins the day. And I look at business models in journalism right now, and I'm really not inspired, especially not in Canada. There's maybe a handful of companies and people that are doing excellent work, and the rest are have quite a bit of catching up to do. I don't know. I don't think government intervention in this way is an answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
So you brought up an interesting theme because we went to TikTok, where I think you're saying that one of the differences there is they have a more robust monetization scheme, right? Is that what you're getting at with TikTok?
they're more focused on people and people as creators. Whereas if I were compare them to Facebook, Facebook has done the opposite. They started with people as creators, but we as creators are not interesting. We're really quite boring en masse. Who wants to look at hundreds of images of a cloud on Instagram or bad photo of someone's breakfast? We're just not that great as creators, and that's where they've latched on to the media and to professional creator class, photographers, fashion, entertainment. Whereas TikTok did the opposite. They thought, well, regular people, we believe in you. We think you're just lacking some tools. Let us do some thinking and give you tools that other channels don't to express yourself. Because maybe the blurry picture of your breakfast is not your fault. Maybe there are some things that we can do. Maybe it's a soundtrack or we put the filter on it. Let us look at it and see how we can make that easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think, one of the reasons they took off in the way that they did, because people really were looking for self-expression. And so that platform has paid attention to that and let people monetize that to a degree that other channels didn't.
So AI has often been described as one of the new general purpose technologies, like fire, the wheel, electricity. And that means that it's this thing that's almost in many ways a solution looking for problems. And so my question for you as a marketer is, how can companies differentiate the various products that they produce with AI? What are the opportunities there?
We're looking at a ocean of opportunities. It's not the best time necessarily yet to start building, mostly because things are in flux at the platform level. They're in flux at the application layer. There's just a lot of movement where it could be the case that you will build something and wake up and OpenAI has killed you and your idea because they released something that just obliterated, hundreds of startups that did that thing. So these are uncertain times, but they're interesting times for experiments and big bets, especially for text-based industries that have been sheltered in many ways from this kind of change. And it's part of the software eating the world trend, which I really do believe in as a first principle to frame the change that's happening and has been happening for quite some time. That's not going away. And if anything, more software will be AI. And we won't talk about it as much, just like we don't talk about electricity all that much. I just make my coffee. That's what I do with it. And so it will subside, that the hype and the fears and the conversations will change in the direction of what can we do with it and how we can make coffee using this and making it useful. And how can we then mitigate some of the risks? Because just like with electricity and fire, you have protocols for that. And it's been, for the most part, good. But we do have infrastructure. We have firefighters. We have, safe electric outlets. There's a lot of things that we did where we learned from experience and something blew up in our face and we made changes and that didn't happen again. Some of the things like that will be happening with AI as well, and we'll get more use from it as humanity. It's fantastic, really. Abstracting away complexity even more, which is a job that seems to be never ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a complicated world. And even in my role at a university, interfacing with students and all the different programs and opportunities they have and choices they need to make. A lot of universities are looking at chatbots as a potential solution to that. And the current generation of chatbots are really like a IVR, is that the right term? The voice response, the automatic voice response system. where there's a programmed set of solutions. If you ask this, then it's probably one of these three answers. You click and it takes you to a web page. But we're getting to the point now where ChatGPT or something similar to it, and a large language module, could actually produce the answers you need.
Which is fantastic and saves everyone time. And I've never used chatbots before. I found them really frustrating and dumb. I think I'm quite average in that kind of experience. So that's changed. I can have conversations about with ChatGPT about movies that I watch, about the books that I read. I can have a very intelligent conversation. If that happened with a human at a party, I would be really quite happy, you know? So I can discuss Star Trek. I can discuss movies that are black and white that no one watches. I can, have a conversation partner and somebody who I can brainstorm with. And so that's great. And it is a good solution to the scale problem that we are facing. Everything breaks at a certain scale. That's what happens, really. It happened with internet, it happened with identity, it happened with many layers upon which we rely to do what we need to do. And when there is too many of us, the system breaks, and then we need to rebuild something new and reinvent the wheel again. Because there is just more of us. Before in the village, I could tell you that I'm me, and that'd be fine. Now, if I want to buy a house in Miami, a whole different situation, not at all ideal or streamlined. And so this is the kind of thing technology can really do for us. It can bring it back in some way to the one-on-one, a level of relating to each other or relating to the world that is a little bit less stressful and maybe more fair. I don't know. I have quite a bit of optimism around technology and AI and what AI can do when it's built for that, when it's built with the humanity in the loop.
Thank you. Well, that is a very helpful point to end on. I have one last question. What advice would you give aspiring marketers and strategists who want to participate in the field of AI?
I'm still an aspiring marketer and strategist, even though I have decades of experience. I think the best advice is to just stay curious and hungry and foolish and unafraid to dive deep and look under the hood a little bit more, to then abstract that complexity for people. It is our job as marketers to relate it to human needs and human lives and make technology make sense and make it useful, and really connect the dots between the tech and humanities. Marketing is right in the middle in tech. So staying curious on both sides of it, you've got to have curiosity and love for the humanity. And you need empathy and understanding for the machines because they're there to please. For the most part, we just all want to make world better and make it suck less and make things future be better than the past. And we aren't always good at it. That comes in waves. But I do hope that at the end we won't be batteries.
Yes, I agree.
It will be making coffee for us, and we'll solve the alignment problem. We will stop freaking out about existential problem. We'll put researchers on it and take some of these things very seriously. We will connect technology and humanity fields better than we have done so far, because before we really just didn't need to. But now we have AI, which is smack in the middle between human brain and neuroscience and technology and deep learning. And both of these fields will influence each other. It's a really interesting, fascinating back and forth. And researchers like Yoshua Bengio are there connecting the dots for people and advancing the field in that way. And so more and more we'll see the back and forth continue. And that is new. And I don't think we've seen technology that was as human-like as AI in quite some time. That part is super, super interesting to me. How machines learn, what can we learn from that? How can we be better humans based on what we learn about human brain? Then we take it to machines, then we realize and learn something about ourselves in the process. I've taken advice from AI from reinforcement learning, the exploit explore paradigm. I found that extremely useful in my own career. I'm like, oh, that's what that is.
I've been excited about that too, because I often, they say, oh, kids are just like us. AI is just like us. And it starts to make me think that there are it's not just that we're making AI in our image, it's that this is what intelligence looks like. That's like the natural, I have the book on my shelf, Thinking Fast and Slow, which is basically explore and exploit, right? You come up with a bunch of ideas. You're like, that's system one. I'm going to just do that all the time. Hot stove, don't touch, that kind of thing. But then when things are unusual, I have to think through them more. And so you have the training of the model. So you apply the model or you train the model, and it's explore and exploit. I even bias, we're all biased to some extent, but if you accept it as just what your data set is, and you adjust your data set, then it's not a moral failing. It's just something to work on.
Yeah. And I do like the idea of step by step, which is a bit of a meme in AI/ML.
I was thinking about that too. Like that the way you describe, the entrepreneurship, you have to have the goal in mind, but there's a whole bunch of steps in between where you're basically removing the noise. You're that's like diffusion.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You have to have but if you don't tell the diffusion what you want, you won't get it. It'll just be noisy.
Yeah.
You have to know what you want to do, but you're going to go through a bunch of steps where it's not clear.
And that is your end goal, is to find the signal. Or just like with the large language model, do the retrieval properly.
That's right.
There's so many interesting thoughts that I have every time I read a book on AI. Just makes me be more aware of my own humanity and how I make decisions and how I can be better. The whole notion of gradient descent, I read about that and I'm like, okay.
Tell me more about that. I'm not familiar with that concept.
No, it's more about the fine-tuning and finding what smallest action can give you the largest reward faster.
Right.
Small concepts like that I find really useful. The step-by-step one is fantastic too. The exploit explorer, for sure. There's interesting questions in AI safety that I like thinking about before I go to bed. And some books that I really like. Fantastic book. Love it. Everybody should read that.
Okay.
That was just so well researched and really well written. And
you say the title out loud? I didn't catch that. Audio.
Machine Learning and Human Values by Brian Christian, who also wrote Algorithms to Live By, which is the book I first read before I saw this. And so when I saw this, I'm like, oh, because Algorithms to Live By is really fun. It's fun and short and useful. And so this one is monumental work. What he has done with that, I'm just blown away by it. I read 3 pages and then I think about it for 3 days. It's a slow read. Yeah, but and it's not even current anymore in some way, right? Because that's pre-ChatGPT.
Right.
You could have written a sequel to this really easily and maybe is working on it for all I know.
It's got to be tough writing a book about AI these days and expecting it to be authoritative for very long.
It is, as far as the alignment problem, maybe one of the best books I've read. Human Compatible is another one I really, really love. I love the concept there that you can't get a coffee if you're dead.
Yeah.
Machines will go after the task you've given it, but how they get there is a whole other story.
Yeah, the whole paperclip optimizer question, right?
Yeah. And so they can't get coffee if you're dead. I remind it to myself when I get to a point of burnout. I'm like, gotta like
Right. Yes.
pull it back, protect the mainframe here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a question of the overarching goal versus the smaller goals. Sometimes we can get fixated on the little goals. Sometimes you have to dispense the little ones in favor of the big ones.
So to me, AI is also a bit of self-discovery for us as that journey. And what else? The prediction machines, a great introduction to AI ML for people with not that much technical background. It's, again, very well written and researched. And there is a follow-up to that by the same authors that is also worth reading. And that is the book that gets cited at conferences without it being named.
Right. Well, I have a vacation coming up next week, so now I have my reading list planned. Thank you for that. And thank you so much for an inspiring conversation.
Thank you. I'm always here if you have more questions or ideas to discuss.
I'm delighted. I'll take you up on that.
Okay.
Guest today was Elena Yunusov. Thank you, Elena, for being on the show.
Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Humanity in the Loop podcast. The opinions expressed by the host and guests of this podcast are their own and do not reflect those of their employer or any other affiliation. Humanity is not automatic.